All right, today we are doing day 2 of section 9.1. So we are still going to be solving systems of equations by the graphing method, which is what we covered on Friday. We graphed two lines in the same coordinate plane. And we figured out where they intersected, if they intersected. Okay, today we are going to keep doing that. However, this time the equations may not always be in slope-intercept form in the beginning. So that is why our warm-up is to solve these equations for y. Essentially, we will be putting them in slope-intercept form. Who can tell me how they got y by itself on number 1? Ellie?
I subtracted 2x on both sides.
Good. Subtract 2x on both sides. That would leave us with just a y on the left. And what is the correct way to write the other side?
Negative 2x plus 9.
Good. Negative 2x plus 9. Technically, our directions this time didn't say slope-intercept form, but it's good to keep practicing that since that's what we need today. All right, who can help me out with number 2? Ryan?
I subtracted negative 3x.
Good. And when we subtract a negative, what are we really doing? Adding. Good. So we add 3x to both sides. That leaves us with 2y equals, how do we write the other side? Anybody? May?
3x plus 8.
Wonderful. Both of those are positive, so 3x plus 8. Is y by itself now? No. What do we still need to do? Divide by 2. And every single piece gets divided by 2. Okay, so 2y divided by 2 leaves me with just a y. I'm going to write it off to the side here. Does 3 over 2 simplify for these x's here? I see people shaking their heads no. 3 over 2 does not simplify. What about 8 over 2? 4. So now y is all alone there. All right, finally we've got number 3. Who can help me get that one started? Delaney?
Minus x.
Good. We need to move that x, so we subtract it from both sides. That leaves us with 3y equals, what is the correct way to write the other side? Shannon? Negative 1x minus 9. Very good. I like putting that 1 here this time. I think that'll help us out on that next step. What is that next step? Good. Divide by 3. We need the y to be all alone. Okay, so that is going to leave us with just a y on the left. I like having this 1 here because it makes us remember what this is as a fraction. Will negative 1 over 3 simplify? What do we think? Can we simplify negative 1/3? No, that does not simplify. Do not rewrite that as negative 3. It's not the same thing. 1 over 3 and 3 over 1 are very different. What about the minus 9 over 3? Ryan? Yes, what does it become? Just negative 3. So there we have y by itself. For our notes today, we don't have a whole lot because we're just building off of what we did Friday. But just a reminder that equations must be in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, in order to use the graphing method to find the solution to a system of equations. So it has to be in slope-intercept form. That's the best way that we know to graph them. All right, so the setup is very similar to what we had Friday. We have two equations. This time for our lines, we're still asked for m and b like we were on Friday. But this time they also ask us for what y equals. So get y by itself. So for these, you might need to have a little space to do some scratch work, either in the margins of your notes. On your homework, you might need to get out another sheet of paper if you write kind of large. For me, I'm going to do it down here at the bottom. So for line 1, I have x minus y equals 6. And I need to get y alone. This is the same thing we were doing in the warm-up. Who can help me out on this one? My first step for getting y by itself. Deja? Good. Subtract the x from both sides. Now in this one we have to be careful because this y has a minus sign in front of it. So we now leave it like a negative y. Remember in the warm-up, we talked about the correct order to write that in. The x part comes first. The x is negative, so negative x. That 6 is positive. That's how I got a plus 6. Now something special still has to happen on this one. Does anybody know what it is? Ellie?
Oh, you have to switch the negative signs.
Good, we have to switch the signs. We do not want a negative y, we want a positive y. Some people think about this as dividing off a negative 1. If we divide everything by a negative, it's going to flip all of our signs. So the x is going to become positive. A negative over a negative is a positive, and that 6 becomes negative. So that can go on my top line. Y equals x minus 6. While we're there, we might as well identify the m and b for that line. Who can help me out with that? My slope and my y-intercept. I need to start seeing new hands or we're going to the sticks. Deshaun? M is 1 and B is? Negative 6. Very good. All right, let's go ahead and graph that line. We start with B. B is on our y-axis, so we go down 6. And we put a point down there at negative 6 on the y-axis. Then we use our slope. Our slope as a fraction would be 1 over 1. Okay, so if you need to write that in, 1 over 1, you can. But that means I'm going what directions? Ellie?
Up and right.
Up and to the right. So up 1 to the right 1. And remember, I like to make lots of points here so that I can see all the places on my graph that that line will go. Now you don't have to do it on this one. There aren't a lot of points to get, but instead of going up and right, I could also go down and left. Just one little point there. All right, let's go ahead and graph that line before we move on to line number 2. There we go. Line 2 right now is 2x plus y equals 0. This one's actually easier to get into slope-intercept form. What do I need to do? How am I going to get y by itself, Tariana? Good. Subtract 2x on both sides. Y equals... What should I write on the other side? Not seeing many new hands yet. Natalie?
Y equals negative 2x.
Very good. Negative 2x. You can put the plus 0, but you do not have to. It's up to you. It might help some people to put the plus 0 there, but you won't usually see it written like in a textbook or anything. So we have y equals negative 2x. We need to know the m and the b. Who can help me out with that? It's like what we were doing on Friday, just identifying m and b. Lexi. Wonderful. Our slope is negative 2. Our y-intercept is 0. So I said it might help some people to put the plus 0 there, but you don't have to. All right, if our y-intercept, or b, is 0, we are going to be starting that line at the origin. Our slope is negative 2. If you want to put your negative 2 over 1, you can. So we're going to use that slope to get more points. Where are we going to go? Natalie?
Down to right 1.
Perfect. Down to right 1 is a great option. Notice that you might trace over a point you already made again. But if you don't want to go down to right 1, we could go not down and to the right, but up and to the left. It's not necessary on this one, but it's good to remember how to do that. And then we have to graph that line. Close. Better. Can't seem to get it on there. There we go. There's our second line, but we're not done. We have done a lot of work, but that's all that it is so far, is just work. What is our actual answer? Ellie?
2 and negative 4.
2, negative 4. Our answer on these is actually the ordered pair, or the point where those lines cross. Which on this case, it's 2, negative 4. So don't do all the work and forget to actually write the answer. So give number 2 a try. Get y by itself. Identify your m's and b's. And graph your lines. It might be easiest to do one line at a time the whole way through, like we did on the first example. If that's not how you operate, that's okay. You don't have to do it in that order. Give number 2 a try, and we'll talk about it in a minute. All right, I know some of you have already moved on to the back page, but let's go to number 2 so we can talk about it. First things first, we need to get y by itself. So if we've got 4x plus y equals negative 3, who can tell me how to get that y by itself? Ryan, what'd you do?
I just subtracted 4x.
Beautiful. Subtract the 4x. So we get y equals, again, And now I keep repeating myself about the correct way to write the other side. So negative 4x minus 3. That's all we had to do to get y alone. Who can identify the m and b? Delaney?
Negative 4x is m. And b is negative 3.
Beautiful. So we won't put the x on the m, just that number. So negative 4 and b is negative 3. We'll go ahead and graph that line. Our first point should go at negative 3 on the y-axis. Our slope is negative 4. If you would like, you can put it over a 1. The negative either is given to the 4 or the 1, but not both. So we can go what direction? Anybody? If we give the negative to the 4, which way are we going, up or down?
Down.
Down, and the 1 is positive, so that means we would go to the right. Down 4 and to the right 1. Or instead of going down and right, we go up and left. We can do that a couple times. Not a whole lot of points on this line. There we go, we got our graph. Then we move on to the other line, line 2. Line 2 is 5x minus y equals negative 6. We need to get y by itself. Kelby, what was your first step there? Wonderful. Subtract 5x. That leaves us with negative y equals negative 5x minus 6. But we don't want a negative y, we want positive y. So don't forget to divide off a negative 1 or just flip all of the signs. If you're changing the sign on the y, the other signs change also. They were all negative, so now they're going to be all positive. So now positive 5x plus 6. That's what goes on that first line, 5x plus 6. I need to identify my m and my b. Danielle, what are m and b?
M is 5, B is 6.
Wonderful. When we go to graph that line, we start at our y-intercept, which is a positive 6. Normally, we would put this 5 over a 1. 5 over 1 normally means that we go up and to the right, but that's going to take us off our graph. So where should we go instead? Down and to the left. Down 5, left 1. Down 5, left 1. Okay, we can only put a few points on that graph, but that's fine because we should be able to see where those lines cross each other. So again, I'm going to emphasize this is all the work that we had to do to get our answer. So far, we have not actually written the answer, though. Who can tell me what the answer is? Natalie? Negative 1, comma 1. Remember, the order matters. We have to put our x coordinate first, then the y coordinate. All right, first thing we got to do, number 3, we got to get our y's alone. So for line number 1, Ellie, what's the first thing you did?
I subtracted 3x on both sides.
Good. Subtract 3x on both sides. That leaves us with negative 9y equals negative 3x. If you would like to write the +0, you can, but we are not going to most of the time. Shannon, what would you do next to get y by itself?
Oh, subtract 1. Subtract x on both sides.
We already did that, so we got negative 9y equals negative 3x.
Oh, you already did it.
After that, what would we do?
Oh, divide 9, negative 9.
Good, we would divide off that negative 9. Now this one's a little bit different from what we've seen so far. Normally when we've divided, we have not had to simplify this fraction, but negative 3 over negative 9 will simplify. Negative over a negative means it comes out to be positive. 3 over 9 simplifies to be 1/3. So we get y equals 1/3 x. We have to identify the m and the b. Logan, what are my m and b for that first line? B is 0, m is 1/3 or 1/3. Very good. We go to graph that line. B is 0, so we start at the origin. Put a point there. M is 1/3, both positive, so we are going to go what directions? Anybody? Ryan? Up and to the right. Up 1, right 3. Up 1, right 3. If you do not want to go up and right, you can go down and left. Down 1, left 3. Down 1, left 3. So we get a good amount of points on that graph. We can put our line through them. There we go. All right, we got our first line on there. In order to get our second line, we need to get y by itself. Connie, what would you do first to get y by itself on the second line?
Add x both sides.
Very good. We have to add the x. So that leaves us with 3y equals 1x plus 3, or sorry, minus 3. My mistake. That 1x is positive, so I just put a positive 1x, and the 3 is negative, so minus 3. Tariana, what should I do to get y by itself now? Divide by 3. That leaves us with y equals. The 1/3 does not simplify. But 3 over 3 would equal, or 3 divided by 3. Anybody? Good, -1. So that 3 on the top was negative, over a positive means it stays negative. -1. So we go to fill in our blanks. 1/3 x minus 1. What is my m? And my b? May?
1/3 and -1.
Good. 1/3 and -1. Sorry, that's a positive 1/3 here. Getting ahead of myself. There we go. All right. We start our graph at -1, and then to get more points we have the same slope, so we're still going to either go up 1 right 3 or down 1 left 3. So up 1 right 3, up 1 right 3, or down 1 left 3, down 1 left 3. These lines are awfully close together. Are they going to cross each other? No. Even before we started graphing the second line, does anyone remember how we would know that these lines were not going to touch? Ellie?
The slope.
What about the slopes?
Wait, never mind. The y-intercept was the same, but one was positive and one was negative, and they had the same slope.
So it
I was
doesn't.
looking at the wrong one.
It's okay. It's
Sorry,
okay.
it has the same slope.
You're right. Yes. So the same slope. That's the important part. The y-intercepts can be different, but we have the same exact slope, which means that these lines are not going to touch. What special P word do we use for that? Parallel is our special P word. And what does that mean about our answer? There's no solution. If the lines do not touch each other, there is no solution. All right, I like number 4 because what's special about my first line? It's already done. It's already got y by itself. They did some of the work for me. So, if y is already by itself, I don't have to do anything to change it. I can go ahead and identify my M and my B. Jariel, what are my M and B? So 1 over 2, we don't use the x, but just 1 over 2 for our slope. And our b, or our y-intercept, is 1. Okay, so we could go ahead and graph that. Start at a positive 1 on the y-axis. If both of our rise and run are positive, we've talked about how we go up and to the right. So up 1, right 2. If I don't want to go up and right, I can go down and left. And just as a side note, when you move on to future math classes, especially Algebra II in a couple years, remember that whole thing about us switching the direction on the slope. It'll help you out. All right, we got our first line done. Second line is not going to go quite as quickly because we have to get y by itself. So let's work on that. Jaquan, what's the first thing I would do to get y by itself?
Subtract 4x.
Wonderful. We subtract 4x from both sides. That gives us negative 8y equals negative 4x minus 8. Y is not by itself yet. Jamal Dixon, what do I still need to do to get y by itself? Very good. Divide everything by a negative 8. Notice that they were all negatives, and we're dividing by negative, so now they're all going to be negative over a negative is a positive every single time. 4 over 8 simplifies to be, anybody? 2 over 4, but 2 over 4 could still simplify to be 1/2, 1 over 2. So we've got 1 over 2x. 8 over 8 is 1. So a negative over a negative, we already said, would be positive. Okay, so we have 1/2 x plus 1. Anything seem special about this? Same slope, but also same y-intercept. We got the exact same line. So if I go to graph it, even if I use a different color, I've got the same y-intercept, same starting point. I've got the same slope. So all these other points I'm making are the exact same. Even when I go to draw that line in, I got the same exact line. What does that mean for our answer if we get the same exact line twice? Anybody remember those three little words? Ellie? Infinitely many solutions. If you get the same exact line twice, you have infinitely many solutions. Every single point on the line is considered a solution. All right, number 5. First thing we have to do is get y by itself. Luckily on these, they look a little bit different, but they're actually pretty easy. Y minus 2x equals negative 5. Anybody have any ideas on how to get y alone? Deshaun? Add 2x. So it's set up differently than the other ones, but our goal is the same. We're trying to get y alone. Since y already has a coefficient of 1, just one y, we're already done. We've already got y alone. So y is equal to 2x minus 5. If y equals 2x minus 5, Jalen, what are m and b?
2 and -5.
Beautiful. 2 and negative 5. We go to graph all of that. We start at negative 5 on the y-axis. We can treat our slope like 2 over 1. So I'm going to go up how many? 2, and over to the right, 1. Up 2, right 1. We can get lots of points this time. We could get one more point if instead of going up and right, we go down and left. Lots of points on this graph. We get our line going through those. Then we can solve the other equation for y. Y minus x equals negative 3. Thoughts on how the y would get alone there? Add x to both sides. Y equals positive 1x minus 3. Jamaro, what are my m and b there? Good. So 1. We don't include the x on the m, just the 1 for our m, and then b is negative 3. We go to graph that. Our starting point should be at negative 3. Okay, and then we have to use our slope to get more points. Where would we go to get more points? Anybody? We're not sure. Our slope is 1 over 1. They're both positive, so we should be going what directions?
Up 1, right 1.
Up 1, right 1. Thank you. Up 1, right 1. We can keep doing that. If you want to go down and to the left, you can do that also. However, our line's already crossed, so we don't necessarily have to do that. These lines cross at a much smaller angle than our other lines do, but they do still cross each other. Remember, we showed a bunch of work, but we still need to give an answer. Can anybody tell where those lines cross? Ryan?
2 and negative 1.
2, negative 1. Very good. All right, we will talk about that last example tomorrow. So that's where we'll stop our notes for today.